It's Mary, and I'm here to show you how to perfectly align your seams when joining tubes. So if you haven't seen my videos on how to cast on, how to do the jogless color change, and slip stitch your ends closed, please do that before viewing this video. So these steps are essential to create a flawless finish on both the front and the back side of your project. I will link to those videos below. So let's get started. Let's seam these two tubes together. So I have tube number 1 and tube number 2 laid out horizontally here, and where I'm pointing to is the color change row on the tubes, and you'll notice that it is on the back side, or what I'm calling the back side, of our blanket. Now I have my cast on edges marked with the stitch markers on the left side, and I have the tails coming off the top edge. So lining these tubes up is very important to aligning the squares. So we need to identify the column of stitches that we are going to use for seaming. So on tube number 1, I'm going to start at the very corner here, and you'll notice the column of stitches has the V pointing to the left. This is the column of stitches we want to use. So I'm going to follow this down towards the middle of the tube, and I'll place a stitch marker. This is going to be the area where I'm going to start. And then if you keep following it down all the way to the other end, you'll see that it comes out perfectly at the corner. Now on the other tube, we want the inside column of stitches, and I'll do the same thing. I'll start in this bottom corner. Again, I want to identify the column of stitches with the V's facing the left, and then I'll follow that column to the middle and place a stitch marker. And then just to verify, I'm going to go all the way to the other end to make sure it comes out at the corner, and it does. So now we are ready to start seaming. Start in the center tube at this square here and here. So start by picking up your tubes so that you can see these two side column of stitches. And I'm going to insert my needle so that I can see the bars in between the stitches here. And what I'm looking for on this first tube are the first two light purple bars. You can see there's two dark purple and then two light colors. And I want to pick up those two light colors first. And you'll notice that the outer stitch there's one purple, dark purple, and one light purple. This is where I want to start. So I'm going to pull my working yarn about halfway through, and then I'll go over to tube number 2, and I'll insert my needle. And what I'm looking for here, I want one light purple bar and one white bar. So it's these two middle stitches here. So I'll take my needle out and insert it where I need it. And you'll notice here that both stitches are light purple on the outside. So pull your yarn through and notice that I'm holding these two tubes so that I can see the column of stitches that I want to use. So go down through the same hole as the previous stitch is coming out and insert your needle and pick up two more bars. And then go over to the second tube and do the same. So insert your needle where the previous stitch is coming out, same hole, pick up two bars. And then you just alternate between the two tubes, picking up two bars at a time. Now what I like to do after each square here is pull my tails tight so I can see how this intersection looks. Here's the front side, and then I'll flip it over for the back side. And both sides look really good. So I'm going to flip it back to the front side and continue to pick up 2 bars on each side until the next intersection. It's important to stay within the same column of stitches. So you'll notice that I kind of fidget with the 2 tubes a little bit so that I can see these 2 columns clearly. As you're inserting your needle, be careful not to pick up or snag the fabric in other areas. Um, you only want to pick up these 2 bars. So I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of lift each one as I go, and that just by feel I can see if I'm picking up more than I need. And if I do, I just back it off and try again. So I just passed another intersection of the square, so I'll go ahead and remove some of the slack to verify the look of that intersection. And it looks pretty good from the front side, and I'll check the back. So I always remove the slack after each intersection. I check the front and the back sides to make sure everything's lined up properly. And now I'll continue on. So at the end of the tubes here, I'll just continue on until I have run out of stitches, picking up 2 bars, and in some instances you may only have 1 bar to pick up, and that's okay. So I've turned my work so that I can finish seaming towards the other end of the tube. So always turn your work, don't flip it. You always want to make sure you're working from the front side of your project. Now, I've come to this intersection and I wanted to show you that I've made a mistake. I'm going to unstitch this section. So what I noticed was the light purple has 1 less row than the white square, and it didn't line up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and unstitch it, and I'm just counting my rows again to verify. And sure enough, my purple is 1 row short. So we can fix this. I'm going to unstitch till about the middle of the purple square. And because the purple is short 1, I'm going to pick up 2 bars of the white and only 1 bar of the light purple. And then I'll continue with the pattern of picking up 2 bars on each side. This is going to even out the intersection here, and it's going to look like I didn't make a mistake. So I would avoid picking up more than 2 bars at a time. If you think you need to make a 3-bar jump, I would back up a little bit and do two bars to 1 bar, and then do another 2 bars. It will be a better seam, and if you do more than 2 bars, you could end up with a hole in your seam, and you don't want that. Okay, now that we have our first seam done, I'm going to leave all of my tails until the very end. And you can see the back looks really good, and the front side looks really good as well. Now we stretch this seam. This is going to allow that seam to stretch with the rest of the project. Simply pull on each end without holding on to the seam yarn. So now let me show you how to seam the next tube on. So we're going to line things up the same way. I have my stitch markers on the left, the tails coming off the top, and I want to find that column of stitches along the very edge. So identify that column of stitches starting in the corner of one end, and your V's will open to the left, and just follow that same column down, place your stitch marker, and do the same thing on the next tube and place your stitch marker. Again, your V's will be to the left, opening to the left, and we're ready to start stitching. So insert your needle into that column of stitches, and we want to find the 2 white bars. And so I'll back up my needle a little bit, I'll only pick up those 2 white bars, and then go over to the next tube, and I want to find 1 dark purple and 1 purple bar. Now this process is the same as the other tube that we seamed together. The only difference is the color. So it's actually the same starting place, but they're just different color stitches. So from here, you're just going to pick up 2 bars on the bottom, 2 bars on the top, and continue across until the end of the tube. When you reach the end, you're going to turn your work and work the same, picking up 2 bars from each tube until you reach the end. Since the tubes are knit in the round, we are actually knitting in a spiral. Aligning the squares has been a difficult process. This is why I have created a detailed process, starting with the work that is done on the machine, then the specific slip stitch process, aligning the tubes for seaming, and the starting points for seaming. All of these elements combined together make for the perfect join on both the front and back side of your project. Let's finish the seam. Turn your work so that you're working on the edge. So my tail is coming off of the left-hand tube, so we're going to start by inserting our needle under the first stitch from the back to the front on the right-hand tube, and you'll pull that tail through. Now we go back to the left-hand tube, and from the bottom to the top, I'm going to insert my needle through that very first stitch and pull it through. Now we're going to go back to the right-hand tube through the same stitch that we just went through from the bottom to the top and pull that tail through. This creates a nice join on the edge of the 2 tubes. And the last step is to knot and bury your tails. So I hope this video helps you to perfectly align your seams when joining tubes, and I would love for you to share your creations with me. Linked below are some of the patterns that use this technique. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. To help my channel grow, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. I'll link below to some of the places you can find me. Thanks for watching.